The massive chamber of the Galactic Council station hummed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered in their designated sections. The circular hall stretched nearly a kilometer across, with platforms floating at various heights to accommodate the different atmospheric and gravitational needs of its diverse members. At the center, a holographic projector waited to display the military contributions each civilization would offer in the coming crisis. Ambassador Jaiwan Park stood on the human platform, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the proceedings. Beside her, Captain Miho Kim adjusted the collar of his dress uniform for the third time. He could feel thousands of alien eyes watching them, and the weight of that attention made his skin prickle with discomfort. The situation was dire. 4 months, the Krell Empire had grown bolder, their mysterious biomechanical warships raiding trade routes that crossed neutral space. At first, the Council had dismissed these attacks as isolated incidents. But 3 weeks ago, a Krell fleet had destroyed an entire trading station, killing thousands. The message was clear: the Krell were testing the Council's resolve, and if no response came, they would continue their expansion. One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy presented their contributions to the defensive fleet. The insectoid Vrex went first, their representative's translator converting his clicking mandibles into standard galactic speech. Above the center platform, holographic images appeared showing sleek warships equipped with quantum displacement drives that could move faster than light without entering hyperspace. Their weapons included adaptive energy cannons that automatically adjusted frequency to penetrate any known shielding technology. The assembled delegates murmured with approval. The Vrex military was legendary, and their commitment of 12 capital ships represented a significant force. Next came the crystalline Lamari, whose representative's body literally shimmered as light refracted through their silicon-based form. Their contribution was equally impressive: 18 vessels equipped with stellar channeling arrays that could focus and redirect the energy of nearby stars as devastating beam weapons. The technology was so advanced that most species barely understood the principles behind it. The Korthan followed, presenting their drone swarm technology. Each of their mother ships could deploy thousands of autonomous combat units, each one controlled by a distributed artificial intelligence network that made traditional jamming and hacking nearly impossible. Their military doctrine emphasized overwhelming numerical superiority combined with perfect coordination. Other species presented similar offerings: energy shields that adapted in real time to incoming fire, weapons that could phase through conventional matter, propulsion systems that bent space itself. Each presentation was more impressive than the last, showcasing technology that seemed almost magical in its sophistication. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Ambassador Jaiwan stepped forward to the edge of her platform, and the chamber's attention focused on the human delegation. She took a breath and spoke clearly into the translator microphone. The United Earth government pledges its support to the Galactic Council in this time of crisis. Earth fleet stands ready to defend neutral space and protect innocent lives. She gestured, and the holographic projector came to life above the central platform. The images that appeared showed humanity's contribution: 12 destroyers, 4 cruisers, and 1 flagship dreadnought. At first glance they looked impressive enough. The vessels were large and heavily built, with thick armor plating visible across their hulls. But as the technical specifications began scrolling beside each ship, the atmosphere in the chamber changed dramatically. Several delegates leaned forward, checking their personal data devices as if they could not believe what they were seeing. Others began whispering to their neighbors, and those whispers grew rapidly in volume. The human warships were equipped with rail guns, electromagnetic accelerators that launched solid projectiles. Their propulsion systems used chemical rockets and traditional fusion reactors. Their hulls were armored with simple composite materials. They had no energy shielding, no quantum drives, no adaptive weapon systems. By the standards of galactic military technology, these ships were antiques. The whispering grew louder. Then someone laughed. The sound echoed across the massive chamber, and suddenly it seemed like half the delegates were joining in. The laughter was not cruel exactly, but it carried a tone of disbelief mixed with amusement at what seemed like an absurd situation. High Commander Threx of the Vrex delegation rose from his seat, his 6 legs moving in what human cultural databases identified as a gesture of confusion. His translator crackled to life, converting his rapid mandible clicks into words that boomed across the chamber. Ambassador Park, I must ask for clarification. Are these holographic displays showing historical vessels? Perhaps a presentation about human military evolution? Surely these are not the actual warships you intend to commit to the defensive fleet. Jaiwan felt heat rising to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "These are our frontline warships, Commander. They represent the best Earth fleet can offer." Another wave of laughter rippled through the chamber. Captain Miho's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he remained silent. Military officers did not speak at council sessions unless directly addressed. Alumari delegates' crystalline form pulsed with colors that the translator interpreted as condescension. "Ambassador, with all respect to your species, these vessels appear to utilize technology that our civilization abandoned nearly 800 years ago. Ballistic weapons? Chemical propulsion? These cannot possibly be effective against modern military threats." "They are kinetic weapons and fusion drives," Jaiwan corrected, though she knew it made little difference. "And they have served humanity well for generations." "On your single planet, perhaps?" another delegate called out. Several others chirped or clicked their agreement. "But this is warfare among the stars. The Krell bioships adapt to their enemies. They will render your primitive weapons useless within minutes of engagement." High Commander Threx's mandibles clicked in a pattern that sounded almost apologetic. "Ambassador Park, I appreciate Earth's willingness to contribute. However, I must be frank. These vessels lack the basic technologies necessary for modern space combat. They have no energy shielding to protect against directed energy weapons. Their propulsion systems are far too slow for tactical maneuvering. And kinetic projectiles, while certainly capable of causing damage, are easily countered by point defense systems that have been standard for centuries." He paused, and when he continued, his tone had shifted to something that bordered on pity. "I fear that committing these ships to combat would result in nothing but unnecessary casualties for your crews. Perhaps Earth should consider supporting the effort in other ways? Logistics, perhaps, or resource contributions." The suggestion hung in the air. Other delegates nodded their agreement, some more vigorously than others. The message was clear: humanity's military contribution was not wanted because it was not considered valuable. Captain Miho could not stay silent any longer. He stepped forward to stand beside Ambassador Jaiwan, his voice carrying the clipped precision of a career military officer. "High Commander, with respect, these ships and their crews have trained extensively for combat operations. We understand that our technology differs from Council standard, but that does not make it ineffective. These ships will hold the line." The laughter had died down, replaced by uncomfortable silence. Threx's mandibles moved in what might have been a sigh. "Very well, Captain. The Council appreciates Earth's commitment. However, I believe it would be prudent to assign your fleet to a rear defensive position. This will allow you to observe modern combat tactics while remaining at a safe distance from primary engagement zones." The meaning was obvious to everyone in the chamber. The human fleet was being placed at the back of the formation, not for tactical reasons, but because the Council considered them irrelevant. They would be kept out of the way where their primitive ships could not interfere with the real fighting. Jaiwan and Miho exchanged glances. Both understood the insult, but protocol demanded they accept the assignment. "We will take whatever position serves the Council best," Jaiwan said carefully. As the session concluded and delegates began departing, conversations buzzed throughout the chamber. Most were about the upcoming battle and the Krell threat. But many were about the humans and their laughably outdated fleet. Some species even began taking bets on how long the human ships would last once combat began. Back in their quarters, Jaiwan sat heavily in a chair while Miho paced the room like a caged animal. "Museum pieces," he muttered. "They called our ships museum pieces." "They do not understand," Jaiwan said quietly. "They see old technology and assume weakness. Should we request additional assets from Earth? Perhaps if we explain the situation." "No." Jaiwan's voice was firm. "These are the ships we brought. These are the ships we will use. Earth fleet will prove its worth when the time comes." 3 days later, the human vessels arrived at the staging area. As they moved into their assigned position at the rear of the Council formation, the contrast was stark. The Council ships were beautiful, sleek, gleaming, humming with barely contained energy. They looked like artwork, like sculptures of light and metal that just happened to be functional warships. The human fleet looked like workhorses by comparison. Their hulls were blocky and heavily built. Their surfaces showed the scars of years of service and hard use. Where Council ships glowed with internal power, human vessels simply sat dark and solid against the stars. On his destroyer, the Sole Defender, Captain Miho stood on the bridge watching the other ships around them. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Hyaji Lee, looked up from her console with barely contained anger. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Vrek Squadron Commander. I think it is supposed to be encouragement." Let's hear it, Lieutenant. The translation came through with mechanical precision, but the condescension was still obvious. Try not to get in the way, humans. Leave the fighting to those properly equipped for it. We would hate to see your antiques damaged. Hyagi's jaw clenched so hard Miho could hear her teeth grinding. Sir, permission to respond. Denied, Lieutenant. Miho's voice was calm but firm. Save it for the enemy. We will have our chance to show them what Earth Fleet can do. From the flagship Terra's Fury, Admiral Sora Choi watched her fleet settle into formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring systems and running final checks. Commander Juno Lee approached with a data pad showing communication intercepts. Admiral, I thought you should see these. They are messages between the Council ships. Sora took the pad and scrolled through the translated conversations. Most were routine tactical discussions, but scattered throughout were comments about the human fleet. Jokes about how quickly the relics would be destroyed. Bets on whether the humans would retreat before ever firing a shot. Suggestions that Earth Fleet should be given children's toys instead of real weapons. They are placing bets on how long we will last, Juno said quietly. Admiral Sora handed back the data pad, her weathered face showing no emotion. Then let's make sure we collect, Commander. Inform all ships. Crew rest periods begin now. When the Krell arrive, I want every sailor alert and ready. We will show the Council what it means to fight like humans. The warning klaxons sounded across every ship in the Council fleet simultaneously. Admiral Sora Choi was reviewing tactical reports in her ready room when the alert came through. She moved quickly to the bridge of Terra's Fury, her boots clicking against the metal deck plates with practiced urgency. Around her, the bridge crew were already at their stations, hands moving across control panels as they brought all systems to full combat readiness. Report, Sora commanded as she took her position at the command station. Commander Juno Lee looked up from his sensor display, and there was something in his expression that Sora had rarely seen before. Uncertainty. Admiral, hyperspace rupture detected at bearing 270. Multiple contacts emerging. The computer is having trouble getting an accurate count because the signatures are unlike anything in our database. On the main view screen, space itself seemed to tear open. It was not the clean, precise emergence that characterized Council hyperspace technology. This was violent, almost organic in nature. Reality twisted and buckled, and then they came through. The Krell Armada. Sora had seen the intelligence briefings. She had studied the grainy sensor recordings from ships that barely escaped Krell attacks. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing these vessels with her own eyes. They were enormous. The smallest Krell ship was twice the size of a Council destroyer. The largest dreadnoughts dwarfed anything humanity or the Council races had ever built. But their size was not what made them terrifying. It was what they were made of. The hulls were covered in what looked like gray-green skin, stretched tight over massive frames. But this was not metal painted to look organic. This was actual living tissue. As Sora watched, the surface of one dreadnought rippled like muscle contracting beneath skin. Veins as thick as transport tubes pulsed with bioluminescent fluid that glowed with a sickly yellow light. The entire vessel seemed to breathe, its hull expanding and contracting in a rhythm that suggested a massive heartbeat. Count? Sora asked, keeping her voice steady despite the unsettling sight. Juno worked his console, trying to make sense of the sensor data. 47 capital ships that we can classify as dreadnought size or larger. Numerous smaller vessels. Admiral, the sensors keep giving different readings. It is like these things are changing even as we scan them. Changing how? I don't know how to explain it. Look at this. Juno brought up a detailed scan of one bio-dreadnought on a side display. As they watched, the ship's hull began to thicken in several areas. New layers of tissue grew visibly, creating additional armor plating where none had existed moments before. It's like they know we're scanning them and they're responding to it. Across the fleet, similar observations were being made. On Vrek's command ships, tactical officers reported to their commanders that the Krell vessels appeared to be alive in the truest sense. On Lumari vessels, scientists were already hypothesizing about the biological processes that could create such massive living organisms. On Korthan ships, artificial intelligence systems struggled to categorize entities that blurred the line between machine and creature. The Council fleet commander, a Vrek's admiral named Korthex, transmitted orders across the fleet. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had fought and won dozens of battles. All ships, battle stations. Maintain formation. We engage on my command. Remember, we fight for the safety of neutral space and the protection of innocent lives. The Krell will learn that the Council does not yield to aggression. The Council fleet numbered over 90 vessels, nearly twice the Krell force. Their ships gleamed as they moved into combat formation, a wall of advanced technology ready to defend civilized space. At the rear of the formation, the human fleet watched and waited. On the Sole Defender, Captain Miho Kim stood at his command station while his crew prepared for battle. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Hyaji Lee, had her eyes fixed on the sensor display showing the Krell armada. "Captain, those ships are not just technology. They are alive. The readings show biological processes, circulation systems, what might be nervous tissue, even what looks like digestive organs." Miho nodded slowly. "So we are not just fighting machines. We are fighting living creatures that happen to be large enough to carry weapons and travel through space." "It is worse than that, sir. Initial analysis suggests they might be able to adapt and change during combat. Our database has nothing like this." The Krell fleet spread out across space, moving with a coordination that suggested hive intelligence. They did not communicate through radio or laser transmissions like normal ships. Instead, sensors detected low-frequency pulses that traveled through the fabric of space itself, allowing the bioships to share information instantly. Fleet Commander Korthex gave the order. "All ships, you are weapons-free. Engage the enemy." The Council fleet opened fire, and for 8 glorious minutes, it looked like victory would come easily. The Lumari ships fired first, their stellar channeling arrays focusing the energy of a nearby star into concentrated beams. The beams crossed the distance between fleets in an instant, striking 3 Krell bio-dreadnoughts with devastating force. The organic hulls ruptured spectacularly, tissue vaporizing under temperatures that matched the surface of the sun itself. The 3 ships shuddered, began to break apart, and died in explosions that lit up space like new stars being born. A cheer went up across the Council fleet. The Krell could be hurt. They could be killed. The Vrex followed up immediately, launching volleys of quantum missiles. These sophisticated weapons phased out of normal space during their flight, becoming effectively invisible and impossible to intercept. They reappeared inside the Krell ships' hulls and detonated with tremendous force. 2 more bio-dreadnoughts were ripped apart from within, their organic tissue unable to withstand internal explosions. 5 Krell capital ships destroyed in the opening minutes. The odds were shifting rapidly in the Council's favor. Then everything changed. The Lumari fired their stellar channeling beams again, targeting the same type of bio-dreadnought that had been destroyed so easily moments before. The beams struck true with the same intensity and temperature as before. The Krell ship's hull glowed under the impact, but it did not rupture. The organic tissue had changed. As sensors watched in real time, the cellular structure of the hull reorganized itself, creating new proteins that could absorb and disperse extreme heat. The deadly energy beams that had just moments ago vaporized similar ships now simply heated the hull slightly before the energy was channeled away and dissipated into space. "Impossible," a Lumari scientist broadcast. "The biological adaptation should take generations, not seconds." More Vrex quantum missiles launched, phasing through space toward their targets. But when they reappeared inside Krell hulls to detonate, something was different. The bioships had grown new internal structures, organic fields that detected quantum phase transitions. As each missile reappeared, these fields destabilized the weapons, causing them to detonate prematurely or fail entirely. The weapons that had just killed 2 dreadnoughts were now almost completely ineffective. On Terra's Fury, Juno watched the sensor data with growing alarm. "Admiral, the Krell ships are adapting to our weapons in real time. Every weapon that hits them becomes less effective with each subsequent use." Sora's expression was grim. "They are not just ships. They are weapons designed specifically to counter advanced technology. Continue monitoring. Record everything." The Krell counterattacked, and now the Council fleet learned what these bioships could do offensively. From organic cannons mounted along their hulls, the Krell launched sprays of biological acid. The substance ate through the Vrex ship's quantum shielding as if it was not there at all. The advanced energy barriers that could stop plasma blasts and deflect laser fire offered no protection against simple chemistry. The acid reached the hulls and began dissolving them, creating breaches that exposed interior compartments to vacuum. Other Krell ships fired what looked like seed pods. These organic missiles struck Lumari vessels and burst open, releasing clouds of spores. The spores were aggressive, growing rapidly wherever they found purchase. They spread across the crystalline hulls of Lumari ships like infection, and where they grew, the crystal structure weakened and fractured. Beautiful vessels that had taken decades to grow began cracking and shattering under the biological assault. The Korthan drone swarms fared no better. The Krell released biological viruses into space, microscopic organisms that were somehow capable of surviving in vacuum long enough to reach the drones. When the viruses made contact with the artificial intelligence networks controlling the swarms, they infiltrated the systems. These were not computer viruses in the traditional sense, they were actual living organisms that could interface with electronic systems and corrupt them. Within minutes, entire drone swarms were turning on their motherships or simply shutting down. Fleet Commander Cortex watched his tactical display with growing horror as ships began disappearing from his formation. All vessels, adapt your weapons. Change frequencies, modify yields, randomize targeting patterns. But it made no difference. Whatever the Council ships tried, the Krell adapted to it. Energy weapons at different frequencies were absorbed just as easily. Kinetic weapons were met with rapidly growing armor. Electronic warfare measures were countered by biological systems that did not operate on predictable electronic principles. The Krell had done this before. They had encountered the Council's technology in previous raids and battles. They had studied it, learned from it, and evolved to defeat it. Every advantage the Council possessed through their advanced technology became a disadvantage when facing an enemy that could adapt to anything given enough time. And the Krell needed very little time. 2 hours into the battle, the Council fleet had lost a third of its ships. Casualties were mounting rapidly. Distress calls filled the communication channels. Ships that had entered battle with confidence now fought desperately for survival. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Fleet Commander Cortex finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. Fall back to Rally Point Gamma. We must regroup. The Council fleet broke formation and fled. Sleek, beautiful ships covered in scorch marks and biological growth limped away from the battlefield as fast as their advanced engines could carry them. The Krell pursued mercilessly, their bioships moving with surprising speed as they hunted down stragglers. In the rear position, the human fleet watched the disaster unfold. On the Soul Defender, Lieutenant Hyagi looked at Captain Miho with barely concealed shock. "Sir, the retreat order includes us." Miho was quiet for a moment, watching his tactical display. The Krell were pursuing the fleeing Council ships aggressively. Ships that fell behind were being destroyed. He opened a channel to the flagship. Admiral Choi requesting orders. On Terra's Fury, Admiral Sora stood at her command station, her face calm despite the chaos visible on every display. She had watched the entire battle. She had seen how the Krell adapted to every Council weapon. And she understood something that the Council races had not yet grasped. The Krell's greatest strength was also a potential weakness. They adapted to what they encountered. Which meant they could not adapt to something they had never seen before. She opened the fleet-wide channel, her voice steady and clear. "All Earth fleet vessels, this is Admiral Choi. We are not retreating." The human fleet moved forward through the debris field left by the retreating Council ships. Broken hull sections drifted past, some still glowing from recent weapons fire. Occasional emergency beacons blinked weakly from escape pods, their occupants hoping for rescue that might never come. Admiral Sora watched it all from the bridge of Terra's Fury, her expression revealing nothing of what she felt inside. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no dramatic declarations. These were professional sailors doing the job they had trained for. Commander Juno Lee stood at the tactical station, coordinating targeting data with the other ships in the fleet. His fingers moved across his console with practiced ease, linking the fire control systems of all 16 human warships into a synchronized network. "Range to nearest Krell vessels is 2,000 kilometers and closing," Juno reported. His voice was calm, stating facts without emotion. "They are maintaining pursuit of the Council ships. Current tracking shows they are not altering course to intercept us." Admiral Sora nodded slightly. The Krell were doing exactly what she expected. They had scanned the human ships when the fleet first arrived at the staging area. Their biological sensors had processed all the data about Earth's vessels and classified them as minimal threats. Outdated chemical propulsion. Simple kinetic weapons. No energy shielding. No quantum drives. No adaptive technology of any kind. By every measure the Krell used to evaluate danger, the human fleet barely registered. "Good," Sora said quietly. "Let them think we are irrelevant. All ships, this is the Admiral. Prepare for broadside engagement. Set railgun charges to maximum power. I want every capacitor at full load." Across the fleet, gun crews received their orders and began final preparations. On the Soul Defender, Captain Miho Kim walked along the corridor that led to his ship's main railgun battery. He could feel the deck vibrating beneath his feet as the massive capacitors charged, drawing power from the ship's fusion reactor. The railgun was not a complex weapon by galactic standards. It was, in essence, a very long tube with powerful electromagnets running its entire length. The concept was simple. Use electromagnetic force to accelerate a projectile to extremely high velocity, then let physics do the rest. Lieutenant Hyaji Lee met him at the battery entrance. "Captain, the crew's report ready. Capacitors are charging now. We will reach maximum charge in 90 seconds. Miho nodded and entered the battery compartment. Inside, a dozen crew members worked at their stations. Unlike the automated weapons of Council ships, these railguns required human operators for targeting, loading, and fire control. The gun crew chief, a veteran sailor named Park Seo-jun, saluted as Miho approached. "Sir, first round loaded and locked. Targeting solution uploaded from the flagship. We are ready to fire on your order." Miho looked at the massive tungsten penetrator sitting in the loading mechanism. It was 3 meters long and half a meter in diameter, weighing nearly 2 tons. The surface was polished smooth to reduce friction during launch. There was nothing sophisticated about it, just extremely dense metal shaped into an aerodynamic form. But when accelerated to 15% of light speed, this simple piece of metal would carry kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. "Stand by," Miho ordered. He returned to the bridge, where Hyaji had the tactical display showing all 16 human ships in formation. Each ship's status indicator glowed green, meaning all weapons were ready. On Terra's Fury, Admiral Sora watched the range counter continue its countdown. 1,500 kilometers. 1,200. 1,000. The Krell ships were getting closer, though they still had not altered course to specifically target the human fleet. A few bio-dreadnoughts had turned to face the approaching Earth vessels, but their movements suggested curiosity rather than concern. "All ships are reporting ready," Juno announced. "Railguns charged to maximum. Nuclear torpedo tubes loaded. All conventional missile batteries standing by. Range to optimal firing position?" Sora asked. 800 kilometers, Admiral. At current closing speed, we will reach that point in 45 seconds. Sora took a deep breath. What happened in the next few minutes would determine whether the human fleet survived this battle. She had watched the Krell adapt to every weapon the Council possessed. Energy weapons became useless as the bioships learned to absorb and disperse the energy. Quantum missiles were countered by organic fields that detected phase transitions. Electronic warfare was defeated by biological systems that did not operate on predictable principles. But the Krell had never faced human weapons. They had never encountered anything as brutally simple as a solid piece of metal moving at relativistic speeds. There was nothing to adapt to, no frequency to adjust, no energy signature to absorb. Just mass and velocity, governed by laws of physics that did not change no matter how much biology evolved. "All ships," Sora said clearly, her voice carrying across the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Choi. The Council's advanced weapons failed because the Krell learned to counter them. Our weapons work differently. We do not rely on energy shields or quantum technology. We fight with simple tools that cannot be adapted to. When we fire, those Krell ships will learn that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions. All ships, weapons free. Fire when ready." Her hand came down on the firing control, and Terra's Fury's main rail gun spoke. There was no dramatic flash of light, no visible beam crossing space. The tungsten penetrator simply left the gun barrel at such incredible speed that it crossed the 800 kilometers to its target in a fraction of a second. One moment it was sitting in the rail gun. The next moment it struck a Krell bio-dreadnought. The impact was devastating. The penetrator hit the organic hull with the kinetic energy of a small nuclear explosion. The impact point did not just rupture, it vaporized. The tungsten rod was moving so fast that when it hit the bioship's tissue, the sudden deceleration converted all that kinetic energy into heat and pressure. The temperature at the impact point exceeded 10,000 degrees for a brief instant. The shockwave propagated through the living tissue at supersonic speeds, creating a hydrostatic pulse that turned organs into liquid and shattered biomechanical systems throughout the vessel. The Krell dreadnought came apart. Its organic structure could not maintain cohesion after such catastrophic damage. Pieces of hull broke away, trailing biological fluids that froze instantly in the vacuum. Internal explosions rippled along its length as fuel systems ruptured. Within seconds, the massive ship was debris. 15 more railguns fired across the human fleet. 15 more tungsten penetrators crossed space at 15% of light speed. 15 more Krell ships learned what it meant to face weapons that did not care about adaptation. 3 more bio-dreadnoughts simply disintegrated under the impacts. The kinetic energy was too much for organic tissue to withstand. A 4th ship was hit in what appeared to be its engine section. The penetrator punched through the hull, through whatever organs powered the bioship, and out the other side, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole a meter wide. The ship died instantly, its biological systems ceasing to function without their power source. On the Sole Defender, Captain Miho watched his tactical display as his ship's first shot struck home. Direct hit. Target destroyed. Reload and acquire next target. The gun crews worked with practiced speed, loading another tungsten penetrator into the railgun while capacitors began recharging. 30 seconds to reload. 45 seconds to recharge the capacitors. The railgun could fire approximately once per minute at maximum power. Across the human fleet, all 16 ships were reloading and preparing for their second salvo. The Krell finally understood they were under attack. Biosensors analyzed the impacts, trying to understand what had just destroyed 4 of their dreadnoughts. The data confused them. There were no energy signatures. No quantum phase transitions. No electromagnetic pulses. Just solid matter moving very fast. Their adaptive biology began responding, growing thicker armor plating, developing layered hull structures designed to absorb kinetic impacts. Admiral Sora watched the Krell adaptation happening in real time on her sensors. Commander Juno, inform all ships. The Krell are thickening their armor. Switch to explosive-tipped penetrators. The second salvo launched 60 seconds after the first. This time, the tungsten penetrators had shaped explosive charges built into their tips. They were designed to punch through armor and then detonate inside the target. Even as the Krell bioships grew thicker hulls, the penetrators adjusted tactics. The rounds struck home. They punched through the new layered armor, which had been designed to stop solid penetrators, and then detonated inside the ships. The explosions created secondary damage, rupturing fuel systems and igniting biological compounds. 2 more Krell dreadnoughts died, blown apart from within. The remaining Krell ships began changing course, abandoning their pursuit of Council vessels to face this new threat. Their organic sensors had finally classified the human fleet as dangerous. But they were learning a lesson that the Council races had already learned. By the time you realized humans were dangerous, it was often too late. Krell ships are altering course to engage us directly, Juno reported. They are attempting to close to weapon range. Then we meet them halfway, Admiral Sora decided. All ships, close to 300 kilometers. Prepare nuclear-tipped torpedoes. I want them armed and ready to launch. Across the human fleet, crews opened sealed weapons lockers and began preparing munitions that most civilized species had banned centuries ago as too barbaric for modern warfare. Nuclear weapons. Atomic warheads. Devices that released the fundamental forces that powered stars. The Krell were about to learn that humanity had never worried much about fighting fair. The Krell collective intelligence learned quickly. After losing 8 dreadnoughts to weapons they could not adapt to, the bioships changed their approach. If they could not evolve to counter human kinetic weapons, they would use tactics instead. Numbers. Overwhelming force. Coordinated attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. The Krell armada split into 3 groups. The largest group remained in the center, maintaining steady pressure on the human fleet. The other 2 groups began moving outward, circling around to flank the Earth vessels. It was a classic hammer and anvil formation, designed to trap an enemy between multiple forces and crush them through sheer weight of numbers. The Krell had used this tactic successfully against other species. Their bioships could communicate instantly through organic pulses that traveled faster than radio, allowing perfect coordination across vast distances. On Terra's Fury, Commander Juno watched the enemy movements on his tactical display with growing concern. Admiral, the Krell are attempting to surround us. If they complete this maneuver, we will be caught in a crossfire. Admiral Sora studied the 3-dimensional plot showing the positions of all ships in the battle space. The Krell flanking groups were moving quickly, trying to get into position before the human fleet could react. A conventional commander would order the fleet to concentrate their forces, moving closer together to present a unified defensive front. That was what military doctrine suggested. That was what the Krell expected. Sora smiled slightly. Commander, execute dispersal pattern Gamma. Juno's fingers flew across his console, transmitting the order to all ships. Across the human fleet, captains received the command and immediately began executing the maneuver. The 16 human warships broke formation. They did not move closer together for mutual defense. Instead, they scattered in different directions like seeds thrown into the wind. Each ship chose a different vector, accelerating away from the others at maximum thrust. Within 2 minutes, the concentrated fleet had become 16 individual vessels spread across thousands of kilometers of space. On the Krell command ship, organic sensors processed this new development. The collective intelligence analyzed the data and reached a conclusion: the human fleet had panicked. They had broken formation and were attempting to flee. This was the expected response from an inferior force facing superior numbers. The Krell adjusted their strategy immediately. Instead of maintaining their large groups, they divided further, assigning individual bioships or small groups to pursue each human vessel. They would hunt down and destroy the Earth fleet piece by piece. Captain Miho Kim stood on the bridge of the Soul Defender as his ship accelerated away from the main battle area. Behind him, 2 other destroyers followed similar courses, creating a small group of 3 ships moving together. On his tactical display, he watched Krell biocruisers beginning to pursue them. "Lieutenant Hyaji," Miho said calmly, "initiate dead ship protocol. Cut all active systems. Reactor to minimum output. No transmissions, no active sensors, no navigation lights. I want us completely dark." Hyaji looked at her captain with surprise, but she followed orders immediately. Her hands moved across the control panel, shutting down system after system. "Aye, Captain. Going dark now." The Soul Defender's lights winked out. The hum of active systems faded to silence. Even the bridge became dark except for a few emergency lights that cast a dim red glow. The ship's fusion reactor dropped to its lowest possible output, just enough to maintain life support in the shielded crew compartments. To any external observer, the destroyer looked like a dead hulk, powerless and drifting. Around the Soul Defender, the other 2 destroyers did the same. 3 human warships went completely dark, carried forward only by momentum. They looked like debris, or perhaps damaged vessels whose crews had abandoned them. There was no power signature, no heat bloom from active systems, no electromagnetic emissions of any kind. The pursuing Krell biocruiser approached cautiously. Its organic sensors scanned the 3 dark ships, searching for signs of life or active systems. The sensors found nothing. The bioship's intelligence concluded that these vessels had been damaged and abandoned, or perhaps their primitive power systems had failed. Either way, they posed no threat. The Krell cruiser moved closer to verify the kills, following standard doctrine. It needed to confirm these ships were truly destroyed before moving on to other targets. The bioship approached to within 50 kilometers of the Soul Defender, close enough that its sensors could penetrate the hull and search for any remaining life signs. Inside the Soul Defender, Captain Miho watched his passive sensors carefully. These sensors did not emit any signals. They simply collected light and radiation from the environment, making them completely undetectable. He could see the Krell cruiser getting closer. 40 kilometers. 30. 20. All crew to battle stations, Miho whispered into his internal communications system. Throughout the ship, sailors moved quietly to their positions. In the railgun battery, the weapon crews stood ready beside their massive gun, which was already loaded and targeted. They waited in the darkness and silence. 10 kilometers. "Now," Miho said quietly. The Soul Defender exploded to life. Reactor surged to full power. Systems came online in a cascading wave. Lights blazed. And most importantly, the railgun fired at point-blank range. The tungsten penetrator crossed the 10 kilometers in a tiny fraction of a second. At this distance, there was no time for the Krell ship to react, no chance to maneuver or adapt. The penetrator struck the biocruiser's hull and punched straight through, the kinetic energy so concentrated that it created a perfectly cylindrical hole through the entire vessel. The shockwave from the impact liquefied organic tissue throughout the ship. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as biological systems failed catastrophically. The Krell cruiser died before its collective intelligence even understood it was under attack. "Target destroyed," Lieutenant Hyaji reported with satisfaction. "That's 3 for us." "Go dark again," Miho ordered immediately. "Let's see if they fall for it twice." The Soul Defender cut all systems again, becoming a dark drifting hulk once more. 15 minutes later, another Krell vessel approached to investigate. It died exactly the same way. Across the battlefield, similar scenarios played out. The dispersed human fleet had become a minefield of hidden threats. Each drifting warship was actually a perfectly functional vessel waiting in ambush. The Krell could not tell the difference between a truly dead human ship and one running silent because the technology was so simple. There were no complex power signatures to analyze, no sophisticated systems whose activity could be detected. Just basic fusion reactors running at minimum output, hidden inside heavily shielded hulls. The Krell lost vessel after vessel to these ambushes. Their tactical advantage of superior numbers meant nothing when they could not find their targets until it was too late. Every time they approached what appeared to be a disabled human ship, they risked sudden death from a weapon they could not defend against. Admiral Sora coordinated the chaos from Terra's fury, using tight beam laser communications that were nearly impossible to intercept. She watched the overall tactical situation and directed her scattered ships like a conductor leading an orchestra. Destroyer Group 3 Krell reinforcements are moving toward Sector 4. Relocate to intercept position and prepare another ambush. Admiral, Commander Juno said carefully, that puts them between two enemy groups. They'll be exposed. Exactly. When the Krell converge on that position, Destroyer Group 6 will hit them from behind. The Krell are learning to be cautious of single ships, so we'll use their caution against them. It was three-dimensional chess played with warships, using empty space as terrain and creating kill zones through pure positioning and timing. The human fleet fought without following any predictable pattern. They ambushed from unexpected angles. They feigned damage and then struck. They split apart and reformed in new configurations. Every move was designed to confuse and disrupt enemy expectations. Then Admiral Sora made her boldest decision yet. She studied the tactical plot and identified a wounded Krell bio-dreadnought that had been damaged in the earlier railgun strikes. The massive ship was still dangerous, still armed, but it was slower than the others and appeared to be struggling with its systems. Commander Juno, prepare a boarding party. Juno turned to stare at his admiral in disbelief. Admiral, we haven't attempted boarding actions in over 300 years. The Council banned them as barbaric warfare. The Council's regulations apply to Council ships, Sora replied calmly. These vessels fly under Earth flag. Get me Captain Yunji Han and her Marine Company. Tell them to prepare for hostile boarding operations. Deep in the Terra's Fury's armored core, Captain Yunji Han received the order and smiled grimly. She was a Marine officer who had trained her entire career for combat operations, but actual combat had been rare. The galaxy's wars were usually fought at long range with sophisticated weapons. The idea of actually boarding an enemy ship and fighting hand-to-hand was something from history books. She assembled her company in the armory. 120 Marines in mechanized combat armor stood at attention. The armor was not the advanced powered suits of science fiction. These were ruggedized exoskeletons, mechanical frameworks that enhanced human strength and protected against vacuum, radiation, and weapons fire. Each Marine carried a chemical propellant rifle, a sidearm, grenades, cutting tools, and enough ammunition to fight for hours. Listen up. Yunji called out, her voice amplified by her armor's speakers. We're about to do something that hasn't been tried in centuries. We're going to board an enemy capital ship while it's still fighting. This is going to be brutal, close-quarters combat in an environment designed to kill us. The enemy is biological, which means you'll be fighting inside what amounts to a living creature. Stay together, watch your sectors, and remember your training. Any questions? A young private raised his hand. Captain, what if their biotechnology infects us or takes over our systems? Yunji's response was blunt. Then you shoot it until it stops moving. These things bleed, which means they can die. Anything that can die can be killed. We're Marines. Killing things that need killing is what we do. There were no more questions. The Marines checked their weapons one final time and moved toward the airlock where assault shuttles waited to carry them across space to the enemy vessel. Terra's Fury closed with the wounded Krell bio-dreadnought, matching its velocity and maneuvering alongside the massive organic hull. At this range, both ships could have destroyed each other easily. But the Krell ship seemed confused by the human vessel's approach, uncertain what was happening. Ships did not approach each other this closely in modern warfare. There was no reason to do so. Assault shuttles away, the flight controller reported. Transit time 30 seconds. The shuttles crossed the gap between ships, carrying their cargo of Marines who were about to teach the Krell an old lesson. Sometimes the most effective way to destroy a ship is to get inside it and break things with your hands. The assault shuttle struck the Krell bio-dreadnought's hull with magnetic clamps that bit deep into the organic tissue. Captain Yunji Han felt the impact through her armored boots as her shuttle made contact. Around her, the other Marines were already moving, checking their weapons one final time before the hull breach. Breaching charges set, her demolition specialist reported. Ready on your command, Captain. Blow it. The shaped charges detonated with a muffled thump that Yunji felt more than heard. The Krell hull was thick and tough, but high explosives did not care about biology. A circular section of hull 3 meters wide was blasted inward, creating an opening into the ship's interior. Atmosphere rushed out briefly before internal membranes sealed automatically, trying to contain the breach. Go, go, go! Yunji shouted, leading her marines through the opening. Inside the Krell bio-dreadnought was like stepping into a nightmare. The corridors were not metal hallways but organic tunnels. The walls pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Bioluminescent patches on the ceiling provided a sickly yellow-green light. The floor was soft and slightly warm beneath their boots. Strange fluids dripped from overhead conduits. The entire ship breathed around them, the walls expanding and contracting with disturbing regularity. Form up. Watch your sectors. Yunji commanded. The Marines spread out into combat formation, weapons raised and ready. Krell defenders emerged from side passages. These were biomechanical soldiers, creatures that seemed to be part of the ship itself. They were vaguely humanoid but covered in the same gray-green organic material as the hull. Some carried weapons that fired acidic projectiles. Others had limbs that ended in blade-like appendages. The Marines opened fire. The chemical propellant rifles made sharp cracking sounds in the confined space. Bullets tore through Krell defenders, proving that despite their alien biology, they were just as vulnerable to kinetic weapons as anything else. The defenders fell, their bodies leaking strange fluids onto the floor. Keep moving. Objective is the neural nexus, 3 decks down. Yunji ordered, checking the tactical map on her helmet display. The map was rough, based on sensor scans of the bioship's internal structure. It showed what appeared to be a large central chamber deep in the vessel's core, likely the brain or control center. The Marines fought their way through the organic corridors in savage close-quarters combat. This was warfare at its most primitive and brutal. No advanced technology, no long-range weapons. Just enemies close enough to see clearly, guns that went bang, and victory measured in meters gained through determination and firepower. They reached the neural nexus after 20 minutes of fighting. The chamber was enormous, easily 50 meters across. In the center hung a massive organic structure that looked like a gigantic brain suspended in translucent fluid. Tendrils extended from it in all directions, connecting to the walls, floor, and ceiling. This was the ship's central nervous system, the biological computer that coordinated all its functions. Set charges on that thing, Yunji ordered, pointing at the brain structure. I want enough explosives to blow this entire chamber apart. Her demolitions team went to work while the other Marines established a defensive perimeter. More Krell defenders were approaching from multiple directions, converging on the chamber to protect their ship's most vital organ. Charges set. Timer running. All Marines fall back to the breach point. Move now. The retreat was just as brutal as the advance. The Marines fought their way back through the corridors they had just cleared, encountering fresh Krell defenders at every turn. 2 Marines were hit by acid sprays and had to be carried by their comrades. Another took a blade strike that penetrated his armor, but he kept fighting despite the injury. They reached the breach just as the timer counted down to 0. The explosives detonated deep in the ship's core. The entire bio-dreadnought shuddered. The pulsing walls went still. The bioluminescent lights flickered and died. Without its neural nexus, the living ship could no longer coordinate its biological systems. It began dying, its organs failing one by one. The Marines made it back to their shuttles and launched, returning to Terra's fury as the Krell dreadnought broke apart behind them. Captain Yunji counted her people as they disembarked. She had lost 3 Marines killed in action and 12 wounded. It was a high price, but they had accomplished something no one had done in centuries. They had boarded an enemy capital ship and destroyed it from within. Mission successful, Admiral, Yunji reported to Admiral Sora. Target neutralized. Sora nodded with satisfaction. Well done, Captain. Prepare your Marines for the next boarding action. The next one, Admiral? We've just proven it works. Why stop at 1? Over the next 4 hours, human Marines boarded 2 more Krell vessels. Each boarding was brutal and costly. But each time, the Marines emerged victorious, leaving dying bioships in their wake. It was warfare the Krell had never encountered. An enemy that would actually board your ship and fight you face to face in your own corridors. The Krell collective intelligence finally reached a conclusion. These humans were the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. The bioships could not adapt to human weapons. Human tactics followed no predictable pattern. And humans were willing to fight at close range with a ferocity that suggested they actually enjoyed combat. The remaining Krell vessels broke off their attack and retreated at maximum speed, fleeing back toward their own territory. They left behind the wreckage of 19 dreadnoughts and countless smaller vessels. Nearly half their attacking force destroyed by a fleet they had initially dismissed as irrelevant. Admiral Sora watched them go. Her fleet was battered. 3 destroyers were heavily damaged. Casualties had been significant. But they had held the line. All ships, cease fire. Begin recovery operations. Get our people home. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council station had been hastily repaired for a victory ceremony. The main hall was filled with representatives from every council race, but the atmosphere was completely different from the gathering where humanity had first presented its fleet. Ambassador Jaiwan Park walked through the hall beside Admiral Sora, both wearing their formal dress uniforms. Around them, conversation stopped as alien delegates turned to watch. But there was no laughter now, no mockery. Instead, there was respect and in some cases, something that looked almost like fear. High Commander Threx approached them, his 6 legs moving in a posture that human cultural databases identified as deep reverence. He stopped before them and lowered his head, his mandibles held in a gesture of profound respect. Admiral Choi, Ambassador Park, on behalf of the Vrex people and my fleet, I must offer my profound apology. We mocked your ships. We dismissed your capabilities. We were wrong and our arrogance nearly cost us everything. Admiral Sora inclined her head slightly. Apology accepted, Commander. You fought with courage when the battle came. That matters more than words spoken before the fighting began. Threx's mandibles clicked in what might have been gratitude. I do not understand. Your technology is centuries behind ours by every measure. Your weapons should have been useless. Yet you achieved what our advanced fleet could not. How is this possible? Sora considered her response carefully. She knew that whatever she said here would be studied and analyzed by every species in the Council. Commander, your people and the other Council races built weapons designed to fight the wars you have already won. You created technology so advanced that it became fragile. Your ships depend on energy shields that can be overloaded. Your weapons rely on quantum systems that can be detected and countered. Your computers control everything, which means anything that corrupts your computers defeats your ships. She gestured toward a view screen showing the battered human fleet in the station's repair docks. Humanity never had the luxury of making our technology that sophisticated. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other on a single planet. We learned that the best weapon is the one that still works when everything else has failed. A gun that shoots even when the power goes out. A ship that flies even when the computers are dead. Tactics that don't require a predictable enemy because we assume our enemies will do unexpected things. A Lumari delegate shimmered forward, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that translated as curiosity. But the cost, Admiral. Your casualties, your damaged vessels. How do you justify such losses? We fight to minimize casualties through superior technology. Captain Miho Kim, standing with other ship commanders nearby, spoke up. We don't justify them, honored delegate. We mourn them. Every person who died in that battle had a name, had a family, had a life. But we accept these losses because sometimes sacrifice is necessary. Our people crew our ships personally. They fight our battles personally. They die personally when things go wrong. That's not a weakness in our system. That's what makes us dangerous. We fight like every ship lost is a family member because it is. Over the following days, everything changed. Alien engineers approached human technicians with questions about backup systems and mechanical redundancy. Military officers requested copies of human tactical doctrines to study. Scientists wanted to understand how to design technology that could not be hacked or adapted to. The Council had learned a hard lesson. Advancement without foundation was just fragility dressed up to look impressive. In quiet conversations throughout the station, human sailors found themselves teaching concepts that the Council races had forgotten. Lieutenant Hyaji Lee spent an afternoon explaining to a young Vrex engineer why having manual controls for critical systems was important. Your railguns require no energy shielding to fire? The engineer asked. Correct. They use pure electromagnetic force. Simple physics. But what if the power fails? Then we have backup generators. If those fail, we have chemical batteries. If those fail, we have manual loading systems that work with pure muscle power. We design everything assuming it will eventually break because everything does break eventually. The Vrex engineer's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. We design for efficiency and perfection. But perfection is fragile. Very fragile, Hyaji agreed. Design for chaos and failure and you'll survive anything. The Council's Joint Military Committee met with Admiral Sora to discuss establishing a training program. They wanted Earth to teach Council forces what they were calling human warfare principles. We're not asking you to abandon your technology, Sora explained to the assembled representatives. We're suggesting you augment it. Keep your quantum drives but install chemical backup thrusters. Maintain your AI targeting systems, but train your crews to aim and fire manually. Build your ships with advanced technology at the front, but keep simple mechanical systems at the core. Make sure that when everything sophisticated fails, you still have something basic that works. One committee member admitted, "We've already begun. 4 major shipyards are retrofitting council vessels with what we're calling human pattern hybrid designs. Advanced alien technology combined with mechanical redundancy and backup systems." Weeks later, as Earth fleet prepared to depart, a Corthan officer approached Captain Miho with a question that had clearly been bothering him. "Captain Kim, why do humans name their ships? Our vessels have identification numbers and serial designations. But yours have names like Soul Defender and Terra's Fury. Why?" Miho looked at his battered destroyer with obvious affection. The ship still bore scars from the battle. His crew had voted to keep some of the damage as a reminder of what they had survived together. Because they're not just machines to us. A ship is home. She's family. When you name something, you develop a relationship with it. You care about it differently. You fight harder to protect it, work harder to keep it running, and mourn when it's lost. But that's inefficient. It's emotional. Yes, Miho agreed with a slight smile. And it's exactly why we win. We don't fight for efficiency or logic. We fight for things we care about. On Terra's Fury, Admiral Sora prepared to give the departure order. Commander Juno handed her a final report containing commendations from the Council, requests for further cooperation, and official recognition that Earth fleet was now considered a first-tier military power among the galactic community. "We went from the back of the formation to leading the fleet in one battle," Juno observed. "Not bad for museum pieces." Sora smiled. "They'll remember this for a long time. The day they learned that sometimes the old ways survive because they simply work better. That advancement without solid foundation is just complexity waiting to fail." She activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Choi. You've done Earth proud. Every one of you. Let's go home." The human fleet departed the Council station, their scarred and battered vessels moving in tight formation. Behind them, representatives from dozens of species watched and understood that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Not because humanity had the best technology, but because they understood the most important truth about warfare: technology wins battles, but will and determination win wars. And humanity had spent 10,000 years learning to never run out of either.